Well, everyone, welcome to Blair. First try at a Senate debate. It's kind of exciting. We have some issues with our technical side, but I think we're going to get audio with John Bruning, so that should be, I think it should be good enough. Tonight, I just wanted to, first of all, thank you all for coming, recognize some of our politicos here tonight. We have my mother and former Governor Kay Orr is here. Former state GOP chair and city councilman Chuck Sigerson and his wife Liz. Our state senator Lydia Brosh. Scott Japp with NRD. Tim Schramm with Public Service Commission. We have candidate David Koppel running for regent. Douglas County Chairman Scott Peterson. And now we're going to have 1st District Chairman Tim O'Dell. You want to come up here? He's going to give us the invocation.
Could you bow in prayer with me? Heavenly Father, as we assemble this evening to hear from our Republican candidates for U.S. Senate, we ask that you give them strength as they campaign across our great state and wisdom to be strong in their convictions. We ask also that you watch over our military as they protect our freedoms so that we can hold events such as this. We ask that you bless this meeting and please watch over everyone this evening as they travel home and keep them safe. We pray this evening in Jesus' name. Amen.
Thanks, Tim. Yeah. Yep. We're going to now have everybody stand, please, and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, I'm going to introduce Mayor of Blair, Jim Ralph. He's going to give us a quick welcome to Blair. Mayor Ralph.
Economic development in the state of Nebraska. There's about 1.4 billion out there. So it's really an honor to have all of you here, and particularly an honor to have our Senate candidates here to enlighten us on all of their different things that they have going for them out there. I always tell people this, and most of you here from Blair, you've heard me say this, being mayor of Blair is the easiest or the best mayor job in the state of Nebraska. We got so many things going for us, I'd have to work to screw it out. Welcome. Enjoy what's going on here tonight, and we'll see you back at Blair later. You can always do your sales.
Thanks, Mayor. All right, real quick, I'm going to go over the rules of our debate. Lee Terry Sr. will moderate the debate, asking questions formulated by the WCRP Debate Committee. Members of the audience may submit questions written on 3x5 cards to Washington County Chair, myself, John Orr, or Tim O'Dell down at this table. There's cards over there on the table. The debate is starting now, and please turn off your cell phone or turn them on vibrate. There will be no opening remarks by the candidates. 1st Congressional District Chairman Tim O'Dell will serve as timekeeper. When the candidate is down to the last 15 seconds, O'Dell will hold up a 15-second sign. When the candidate is out of time, a bell will be used to signal the time has run out. Just like that. Each candidate will get 90 seconds to respond to each question. If another candidate wishes to rebut the answer, they will have only 30 seconds for the rebuttal. The candidate will, being the target of the rebuttal, will then get 30 seconds to respond. Each candidate will receive 90 seconds for closing remarks. Closing remarks will begin at roughly 8:20. The WCRP asks that members of the audience to remain silent to ensure candidate answers are heard. The Washington County Republican Party will conduct a non-specific straw poll immediately following the end of the debate. The Washington County Republican Party would like to thank Lee Terry Sr. for moderating the debate, each candidate for their participation, and the debate committee for their hard work in preparing for this debate. God bless America.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I always enjoy being in Blair. We have John Bruning for only about 10 minutes. He's in Washington, in case you don't know, at the Supreme Court arguments for health care. And so I would like to ask the first question of John Bruning, and this question will be for all the candidates too. But John, what are you doing in Washington as far as working with the group on the health care issue? What do you expect to happen from the Supreme Court? And if you do not win, what do you intend to do as a senator if you're elected to do something to get rid of Obamacare?
Good. Well, I just wanted to say thank you very much to John Orr and the Washington County Republicans for allowing me to appear here from Washington, D.C. I apologize that I'm not there today. This morning I was in the U.S. Supreme Court with a number of my colleagues. Obviously, this is a case that all of us Senate candidates feel very strongly about. I think it's critical that we defeat this piece of legislation. You know, you have to remember, it's not just about health care. This is about the boundaries of congressional power, the boundaries under our Constitution. Where is it that we're going to draw the line when it comes to congressional power? And so this is a case that's near and dear to my heart. We filed it last March. I was president of the National Association of Attorneys General. We were 13 states at the time. We filed the case minutes after the president signed the bill. We were mocked roundly that we couldn't succeed. Our position was that we had to succeed because the Constitution provides specific enumerated powers to the federal government, and they don't include getting in the middle of health care. So we were successful at the federal district court, successful at the Court of Appeals. Today at the Supreme Court, the first day of 3 days of oral arguments, which is really unprecedented. Very few cases in American history have been given 6 hours of argument over 3 days. Today was just the first salvo, but tomorrow morning is really the main event, the debate over the mandate. And the issue is whether or not Congress can force Americans to purchase health insurance. If they can force you to purchase health insurance, they can force you also to purchase, burial insurance or long-term care insurance, or maybe even electric cars or broccoli, because you'll be less of a drain on Medicare as you access it into your 60s and 70s. So this is a very, very important case for this country and the future of this country and the definition of congressional power and how far they can go under the Commerce Clause. So I appreciate the fact that Nebraskans have been very, very supportive of me being here and me spending these state resources to pursue a case that I think goes right down to the essence of our liberty and our freedoms as Americans here in the greatest country in the world. Lee, in answer to your second part of your question, this is a case that I will continue to pursue whether I'm in the Senate or not. If I am indeed in the Senate, I think the first thing we need to do, if this case is upheld, is to repeal it. If I'm not in the Senate, I'll continue to fight it through every legal means available. But I think it's very important that all of us as Americans continue to fight this battle.
John, can you hear me?
Preserve liberty.
John Bruning, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the opening remarks are supposed to be 90 seconds. You've gone a little over. Is there a conclusion you need to come to? And then we'll go to the same question with the other candidates and give them a little extra time. We've got a bad deal here that we got a sign that says 15 seconds that you can't see.
Well, I apologize, Lee. I think what I'll do here, I just wanted an opportunity to say thank you to the Washington County Republicans. I know this is an awkward medium, and I will not burden my colleagues this way. Thank you, John Orr, for allowing me to participate even for a few seconds tonight. I appreciate it.
How long are you going to be able to stay with us, John?
Well, I don't anticipate doing an entire debate this way, Lee. I can barely hear you, and I know it's very awkward for my colleagues, so I apologize, but I'm grateful to be able to participate even briefly.
Thank you, John. You're one of the few people that ever said you can barely hear me. Most people think I talk too loudly. Let's go to the same question with... Deb, if you would answer your feelings on health care.
Okay, thank you, Lee. Thank you all for being here this evening. It is very, very important, this election is, and it's very, very important that you're here to learn about the candidates and the issues and where we stand. I believe the question was, if elected to the United States Senate, what would I do about Obamacare? I would repeal it. It needs to be repealed. We need to look at having a discussion on health care. That didn't happen when Obamacare was passed. It was rammed through, I feel. It is a huge mandate on every citizen in this country. But more importantly, what we have to look at is how are we going to address health care in our country? You know, we can look at tort reform. We can look at allowing for the easier formation of healthcare associations for people in small businesses, people in agriculture. We could look at allowing insurance to be carried across state lines. All of those things are important, and they were not discussed by Congress when they passed Obamacare. I think we need to look at how healthcare is delivered in this country. We need to look at how it's financed, how it's delivered, and what kind of outcomes we want from it. Government can't be everything to everyone. All of us in here know that. But we need to have the discussion, and that did not occur with Obamacare. Right now, we're looking at care being provided on a fee-based schedule. If you go in with a backache, a doctor will prescribe an MRI, possibly surgery. I think we need to look at value-based health care in this country so that our medical providers can be reimbursed for having a consultation, which is a lot less expensive than having procedures done. These are just a few ideas. It's not an easy topic, everyone knows that, but it's one that we need to have a serious discussion on, a serious debate, if we're going to make any changes that benefit the citizens in this country.
Don?
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for coming out to be with the candidates. I've seen a lot of Pat and Deb, and we're getting to be very, very good friends on the campaign trail. You know, I actually argued 3 cases in the United States Supreme Court, and when I say that, I don't mean I sat in the audience and watched and did a news conference afterwards. I mean I actually argued the cases in the Supreme Court of the United States. 2 of them were death penalty cases, and the third was Stenberg versus Carhart, the partial birth abortion case. The briefs in those cases were written by my staff, and I did the final editing and signed off on those briefs. I think it's fine John sitting in the audience and doing news conferences, but I actually did the real work when I was the Attorney General of the state of Nebraska. I, too, believe that we should repeal Obamacare. It's a vast federal overreach. I hope that the Supreme Court of the United States will declare it unconstitutional. I think it'll probably be a 5-4 decision with Justice Kennedy casting the deciding vote one way or the other. But we're supposed to be a government of limited powers. The federal government is supposed to have limited enumerated powers, and those are found in Article 1, Section 8 of the United States Constitution. We need to return to the concept of our founding fathers of a limited federal government, with most of the governing that's needed being done at the state and local levels. Obamacare is a vastly expensive and ever-increasing expensive federal takeover of our health care. It eventually will lead to poorer health care quality in the United States. It will eventually lead to rationing of medical care in the United States. That's not where we need to go. We need to use the principles of the free market to bring down the costs of health insurance. We need to leave the decisions on medical care to the doctor and the patient, not to bureaucrats in Washington or thousands of pages of federal regulations that tell us what we must and cannot do about our own health care. So if I'm elected to the United States Senate, I will most certainly be pleased, I hope, to be the 60th vote to repeal Obamacare, just like Ben Nelson was the 60th vote to impose that monstrosity on our nation. Thank you very much.
I'm a conservative Republican, and from 2000 to 2006, the Republicans had the presidency, the Senate, and the House. They had all the power in the world. And I was duly appalled with the lack of leadership we received from them regarding driving an agenda which would reduce the scope of government in all areas of our lives. And all I saw, I looked at this situation, I said, why are these men and women not leading? And it's because they were career politicians. And at that point, I said, no more. We had all the power in the world, and all the Republicans said about health care was, we're against government-run health care. Now, that's a novel idea. I'm sure about 99% of us are against government-run health care, but there was no solution. Now, I grew up in the health insurance industry since 1982. I was 23 years old. And what I'm saying is number one, we cannot leave all of the decisions in the Supreme Court hands. It's about we the people. And really, the only way we're going to get this right is as a people. And if we go to the people and we start leading with the solution, people will get involved, and the court, it will not be up to the courts. This is what we get. We get trash solutions. And really, this is not about health care. It's about socialism is what it's about. It's never been about health care. And we're being duped into thinking it is. And so that's what I'm about. I'm about leadership. I'm about taking it to the people, getting the people behind the cause, and really backing President Obama up against the wall where he belongs. He's not for us. And so, yes, we need to overturn it in the Supreme Court, but I'm not counting on that. We, the people, have the ultimate decision, and as United States Senator, I will help lead that cause and get this nation back to the capitalistic society it's supposed to be.
Thank you very much. The World Herald did an article in which they said that the three major candidates, they eliminated, I don't even think they mentioned you in the story, Mr. Flynn, so I want to get your comment on that later. But they mentioned that you three candidates, Deb Fischer, Don Stenberg, and John Bruning, were all in the same boat as far as health care, spending, and taxes are concerned. So let me ask that in a two-part question. Number one, do you agree with that you're all on this in the same boat on those issues? And number two, what would distinguish you from the other candidates? John, are you still with us? Is John? Evidently he's gone. All right, we'll start with, we started with Deb last time. We'll start with you, Don.
Well, I think that what the major candidates say on these issues today are very much similar to each other. I think the difference, especially between me and John Bruning, is our records. As the state treasurer, I cut my budget by 13%. As the Attorney General in Nebraska, John Bruning increased his budget in 8 years by 96%, faster than the increase in the federal budget. So if we're looking at who can actually cut budgets when they've been given the opportunity and who's done it when given the opportunity, then that's a clear difference. And I think if you can't cut your own budget here in Nebraska, then why do we think you'll do that if we send you to Washington? I have been very consistent conservative on a variety of issues. I have always been pro-life. John Bruning started as pro-choice. When I lost the partial birth abortion case in the U.S. District Court, I appealed it all the way to the the United States Supreme Court. When John Bruning lost an abortion case a year or so ago, he refused to appeal that case and take it up and defend that statute in a higher court. I am opposed to affirmative action. John Bruning started his career being in favor of affirmative action. I would have voted against Eric Holder as Attorney General of the United States. John Bruning wrote a letter supporting Eric Holder. So there are substantial differences on what I think are very important issues in our record. Thank you.
Deb?
Okay, thank you, Lee. I think the question here is not probably who's the most conservative, but who's the conservative who's been effective. Since being elected to the legislature 8 years ago, I have a strong, proven conservative record. I've taken the tough votes. I've taken on the tough issues. I've helped to pass the largest tax relief package in the history of Nebraska. We repealed the estate tax. I've introduced and passed legislation on eminent domain to protect private property rights. I've introduced and passed legislation dealing with occupation taxes on telecommunications to cap those taxes. But I'm also a wife of 40 years. I'm a mother of 3 grown sons. We're ranchers. I'm a small business owner. So while I've been effective as a legislator, I also have that real-life experience. I think that's what distinguishes me from Mr. Bruning and Mr. Stenberg. I haven't been running for the United States Senate forever. I haven't been in government forever. I've served 8 years in the legislature. Before that, I served on a school board. I volunteered in my community in many organizations, like all of us do in rural Nebraska. That's what makes rural Nebraska strong. And that's how we move forward. So when you ask what makes me different, I believe the main thing is I'm not that career politician.
Pat, if you would answer that question of what distinguishes you from the other candidates that set you aside and make people want to vote for you. And also, I would like for you to answer your feelings on the World Herald treating you as not a part of this campaign.
So how long do I have for that?
You got 90 seconds.
For the total.
Okay, yeah, let's go after the World Herald. That's owned by Warren Buffett. And the fact of it is this. Do you want a leader in the United States Senate that starts going over the hurdles, whether you have a liberal media or not? They know very well that we can smash the Democratic contender in this race. And so they don't want to bring up Pat Flynn for nothing, because it will be a slam dunk. So I don't mind that, because there's plenty of that in Washington, that we need to take the conservative message to the country. And I can say, bring it on when it comes to the Omaha World Herald. We'll see what happens here. We have a small army. The difference between me and the others is this. I don't question their conservatism, okay? But I do question the character. You know, one person, he gets Attorney General. 2 days later, he's running for United States Senate. Well, that's a commitment to these Nebraskans, isn't it? The next gentleman here, 3 months after he's elected for state treasurer, he's run for United States Senate. I don't really think that's not character when it gets right down to it. Actually, I sold my business last May. I burned the boat and got in this race with both feet. I'm an investment advisor. I've been since age 23. I know the policy of money. I know the policy of leadership. And if we don't get this right with real leadership, we're all sunk. So that's what I'm doing, leadership.
I assume, Mr. Stenberg, you would like some rebuttal time on that, because that was a question I was going to put to you, and the fact that you got elected for treasurer and then announced your Senate candidacy almost immediately, and particularly since this became an issue with Governor Heinemann, that he was going to run for the Senate, and people wonder, how can you just be elected as governor and then all of a sudden decide, oh, I was just fooling, I don't think it's the best job in the world, I want to be senator, but you've done that.
Well, frankly, I thought that the governor would run for the Senate, in which case I would have supported him for it. To me, it's just up to the people of the state of Nebraska. I think what this election is about who's the best person to represent Nebraska in the United States Senate. The candidates have different backgrounds, and it'll be up to the people to choose which person has the background that they feel they can most effectively represent them in Washington. As I said, as the state treasurer, I've cut my budget by 13%. As the Attorney General, I ran the office on the third smallest budget in the United States. I have a proven record as a fiscal and social conservative, and I'm putting that record on the line and doing all the hard work of running for this office to give the people of Nebraska another choice in the U.S. Senate race.
Deb, you want a rebuttal on that? All right.
Mr. Flynn didn't mention me by name, but when he brought up the character part, I would like to respond to that. I'm completing my term as a state senator. This is my last year, my 8th year. We happen to have 11 days left in our legislative session. I'm there working for my constituents. I am there working for Nebraskans. I take my job very, very seriously. Senator Brosh can tell you I'm known for, I'm known for being kind of tough down there, but I'm also known for being a hard worker. And I think that's important. I made a commitment to my district when I was elected. I made that commitment for 4 years. I was reelected, and I committed to my constituents and the people in this state that I would fulfill my term, and I am doing that.
Pat, you can have rebuttal time if you wish.
Well, I think Don Stenberg said it all. I actually signed up with the Federal Elections Commission in October of 2009, signaling to Ben Nelson not to vote for Obamacare. And he obviously thumbed us in the nose, and all of Nebraska and the nation when it gets right down to it. So everybody in the world thought Governor Heinemann was going to be running for U.S. Senate at that point. So I was willing to run against Governor Heinemann. Don Stenberg said he was going to go for Heinemann. I was going to run against him. He was the second man best in this race by his thoughts. So that's why I ran. I thought I was the best man in the race.
Deb, the World Herald credits your position in the race as waiting for the candidates Stenberg and Broning to brutalize each other, thereby being weakened, and you will be standing in the wings as a third option. Is this a fair analysis of your campaign?
Well, it sounds like their plan, doesn't it? My plan is that I'm out there campaigning. I worked really, really hard, put on about 25,000 miles before the legislative session began in January. I am out and I am campaigning on weekends, on recess days. That's what's important. The majority of my contributions, over 95%, come from within the state of Nebraska. They come from people who have never been involved in a campaign or the political process before. There's a lot of momentum, a lot of interest. I have grassroots organization across this state. I have a lot of volunteers that are here with me tonight. That's how you win a race in Nebraska. You do it by getting Nebraskans involved in the race and excited about the race. I have endorsements from Governor Kay Orr, who is one of my co-chairs of my state committee. I have endorsements from my colleagues. I have endorsements from Nebraska Cattlemen, from the Rural Electric Association. That's how you win a race in Nebraska, is you get Nebraskans involved. So I think my plan is to keep Nebraskans involved, to keep you folks excited about this race. It is very, very important that we take this Senate seat. It's very, very important that we send somebody to Washington who's going to work for us. And I think I'm that person. Thank you.
While we're on the question of brutalizing your opponent, I would like to turn to you, Don Stenberg. You were accused of brutalizing your opponent when you ran against Chuck Hagel by making him a carpetbagger, even though he'd lived in Omaha for 4 years before he ran. How far do you intend to go in this Senate race, trying to make your opponents look bad and keeping in tune the feeling on the presidential election that they're killing him and making it easier for Obama? Don't you have to be careful that you don't make whoever is the final candidate in the Senate race not good fodder for Bob Kerrey, for Big Apple Bob?
Well, let me begin by pointing out, as perhaps you will recall, Lee, that following the U.S. Senate primary with Chuck Hagel, I united the Republican Party behind Chuck Hagel so that he defeated Ben Nelson in the fall election. For that, I was awarded the first ever Unity Award awarded by the Nebraska Republican Party. So I know how to bring a team together. But this race is about the future of our nation. We need to balance our budget. We need to cut federal spending. We need to develop our domestic energy resources. We need to secure our borders. and we need to roll back the heavy regulatory burden imposed on us by the federal government. John Bruning and I have both held the same office. So there are some obvious, easy comparisons. And I think the question I'm asked most by ordinary citizens, what's the difference between you and John Bruning? I'm not going to shrink from answering that question because there are very important differences. I ran the Attorney General's budget on the third smallest budget in the United States. My budget went up less than 3% a year. John's has gone up 12% a year. I didn't give up on an abortion case. John did. I was never pro-choice. John was. I was never for gun control. John was. Those are important issues. They speak to the core values of a person. Mine have always been the same. John seemed to move around depending on each election.
Pat, would you like to comment on that, on how far you would go to demonize your opponents and hurting them for the campaign?
Pat,
I mean. Pat.
Excuse me, I thought you wanted me.
Well, I've never been into demonizing too much, actually. I think truth pierces all when it gets right down to it. And I'd rather give the characteristics of who I really am. You know, I will call a spade when I see it, because that's my duty. And really, that's what the people in Nebraska need. They need truth. And so if I see something wrong, I'm going to call it. And if I thought these other three candidates were the perfect candidate, I wouldn't be running. You know, I've had enough of this. I've seen it in 2000 and 2006, and shame on me if I'm going to buy into that again. And so I really, I was a high school youth minister for 13 years. I worked with high school teens. And really, you think about that, high school teens and God in today's society are not synonymous. But the fact is, we became the #1 youth group in the state. We had 100 teens voluntarily attending out of a public high school of 350 students. And so what I always did is this. I led with truth. I smacked it hard. It became attractive to them. I believe that as a nation, that's what we want as a people, as a nation. We believe in the Constitution, and really our Constitution is not being upheld. So I'm saying, really, I'm willing to give my neck. I'm showing it by the way I'm running this race. I sold my business and got in with both feet, and that's my commitment to America and to Nebraskans.
Deb, would you like to comment on that, on how much you would brutalize your opponent to hurt him going into the campaign if you are not the nominee?
I don't know. I think you're brutalizing us by hanging on this question. I'm
a part of the liberal media right now, so.
Boy, that would be a first for you. So, no, I want to run a campaign on the issues. You know, Nebraskans, we understand the importance of this race. I've said that earlier. Nebraskans are so informed on the issues. I represent a legislative district that's the size of New Jersey. I'm used to traveling across this state in my capacity as a state senator for the 43rd District, and also in my capacity as chair of the Transportation Telecommunications Committee. And I can tell you that people in this state understand the issues. They understand what's going on. You have good ideas. We need to take those good ideas to Washington. You know, it sounds like a soundbite. I'm usually not good at sound bites. We need common sense. We haven't seen that in Washington in a long time. So we need to talk about the issues. We don't need to bash each other. You know, we're going to do an occasional little poke, I think. But we don't need to sit up here and bash each other. We're going to have a strong candidate, hopefully it's me, that faces Bob Kerrey and takes him down and sends him back to New York.
Well, hang on to the mic, Senator Fisher. I would like to ask you one other question. It's normal for a young person in politics, or a young politician, a person that's just started to use that expression, I'm not a career politician. Well, going back to what Newt said about Romney when he said he was not an insider, he says the only reason you aren't an insider is because you weren't elected the last time around. That's true of you, isn't it? When do you all of a sudden become a career politician, in the sense that you're a state senator now and you're trying to be a United States senator, and I assume that if you get elected you would stay around for a while. When is a career politician, when is a not career politician really a career politician finally?
I can tell you why I believe I'm not a career politician. I think people in this audience have to decide who is a career politician. I believe I'm not a career politician because here in the state of Nebraska, we are very, very, very fortunate that we have a citizen legislature. We go home and we do our regular work. We go home to our regular lives. We're in session this year 60 days. As I said earlier, we have 11 days to go in this session. We adjourn April 12th. Usually I'd be going home and we'd be AIing cattle on the ranch the end of May. I hope to be campaigning, though. That's what we do in Nebraska. It's viewed as public service. That's how we need to view these jobs. I said I was on a school board. That's public service. We have people in here who are on NRD boards and running for NRD. That's public service. That's not a career politician. And serving on a school board and serving in a citizen legislature, that's public service to me. It is not being a career politician who's been on the ballot a number of times running for statewide office.
Don, I assume you want some rebuttal time on that. I saw you taking notes.
Well, it's not so much rebuttal, but I'll comment on the question. I guess it depends on a definition of a career politician. In my case, I've spent more time in the private sector than I have in elected public office, considerably more time. I term limited myself as Attorney General. There's no term limit on Attorney General in Nebraska, and after 3 terms, I voluntarily left office. I didn't seek re-election to a 4th term. And I think experience is an important factor. If we look at who gets elected to the U.S. Senate, it's usually been people with government experience. Thank you.
We've got a question here from the audience. It's rather an interesting question. If any of you saw Harry's Law yesterday, she shot a drone out of the sky that was snooping on a bedroom scene of a sexy a teacher in a sexy dance. The question is, it was recently reported that our president has ordered drones to fly over the United States to catch criminals. What can you do, or what can we do to prevent this from happening? So, Deb, would you start on that?
I didn't see the news report that the person's referring to, so I don't know where that came from.
Well, I didn't know that the president had ordered that, but maybe he has. Do you know that, Don?
I have not heard that that's what happened.
We've seen stories that the police departments are starting to bring drones into the activity, and the people are concerned about this type of snooping on their private lives. And as the show was last night, the showed a drone even peeking into a bedroom window. Now, if that's possible in police work, we know that the police are going to be using drones. How do you feel about that?
I believe our privacy is very important, and I would certainly not want the government infringing on my right to privacy. We live in a dangerous world, but I believe as citizens of this country, we have rights, and those rights better be protected. When it comes to non-citizens in this country, I think that's another issue, and we need to make sure that our country is secure. But any U.S. citizen in this country has rights, and if this is happening, I would certainly look into it to see if the president gave the authority or who did.
Don, this may even go into the Patriot Act, which I'm sure you have a feeling for, but do you have any feeling on drones being used by the police?
Well, again, I didn't see the report, so it's difficult. to respond directly, but clearly the Constitution of the United States prevents unreasonable searches and seizures, which means you need probable cause before you can investigate the activities of a private person or intrude into their private lodgings and other private papers and so forth, as provided in the U.S. Constitution. It's one of the most important rights in the Constitution, the protection against unreasonable searches and seizures, and I strongly support it.
Okay. Pat, you have a comment on that?
It's President Obama to his ultimate. He is not for America. He has said he wants to remake America, and he meant it. He should have never got out of the gate, really, when it came to his citizenship, as far as I'm concerned. Where was the House and Senate on that? There is a full-blown assault on life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness in America today. And if you think I like talking this way, it's not true. But I'm going to call what I see. And as a United States Senator, the only way we're going to stop this man is if we, the people, get behind the cause and back him up against the wall where he belongs, because he is a very dangerous man. He is not for us. And if we think he is, we're wrong. And so as a U.S. Senator, I would be raising it to the roof on what's going on here. And the only way we're going to get that is we, the people. And so, really, he knows that Americans are just going to probably sit idly and just go, oh, nothing's going on. But that's what I'm saying about leadership. And truthfully, as your next United States Senator, I need you to have my back very much, because without the people, we got what we got now.
Hang on the mic, Pat. I would like to ask all of you, do you feel that there's a need to eliminate certain agencies in the United States in these departments that exist, and if so, what ones?
Yes, I believe the federal agencies are usurping the power of our elected officials. They're taking away our liberties, and they're creating a culture of dependence and destruction. And really, the Congress gave these federal agencies the right. They gave away their responsibility as congressmen. And so, really, the agencies I'm after are this. The first agency is the EPA, a 70% reduction. The next agency is the Department of Energy. Eliminate it. The next agency is HUD. Housing should eliminate it. Housing should be a private matter, not a public matter. The next agency is the Department of Education. Eliminate it. That's been around since 1979. That means a lot of us in here got an education without it, which is pretty hard to believe. And so one gentleman said to me, Pat, what would you do with that? What would you replace that with? I said, well, how about parents, school boards, communities, and the state if we need it? The last agency is the Department of Labor, a 70% reduction.
He remembered all of them. Don, if you would answer that question too, please. What agencies would you eliminate if you had when you get into the Congress?
Right. Well, I've identified at least two, and my criteria for eliminating federal agencies or federal programs is to first look for those that have failed in their purpose for their creation. In the case of the Department of Education, it was created for the purpose of improving K-12 education throughout the United States. Since its creation in the late 1970s, K-12 education test scores have declined. The department has failed. What we need to do is get rid of the bureaucrats, get rid of the federal rules and regulations on education, block grant whatever money it is we're going to provide from the federal level to the states without any strings attached except that they be used for education, and take the bureaucrats and the regulations out of the picture so that our school boards and our teachers can get the job done without having to do federal paperwork, and they can do it the way they determine is the best way to educate our kids. Department of Energy is a very similar situation, created to reduce America's dependence on foreign oil. That it was created in the 1970s. Our dependence on foreign oil has increased. I would preserve the nuclear regulatory functions of the Department of Energy. Otherwise, I would eliminate the bureaucrats in that agency and save the money. And what we need to do if we want more energy in the U.S. is to get the federal government out of the way, reduce regulations, and open our federal lands onshore, in Alaska, and offshore to oil and gas development. That's how we'll become energy independent in the United States.
Senator Fisher?
Thank you, Lee. Last year in the legislature, we were looking at $1 billion shortfall, and Senator Brosh knows that we had some tough decisions to make with that. As a committee chair, we were charged with looking for savings of those agencies that were under our committee jurisdiction. So we went through that process last year in the legislature, and we were able to balance our budget. I obviously support a balanced budget. I'm getting ready tomorrow. We will pass what will be my 8th balanced budget since being in the legislature, where we are required to do so. I can tell you from experience one agency that needs to be eliminated, and that's the Federal Highway Administration. We were visiting earlier about all the rules and regulations that you have with construction and how that adds up with costs. The Federal Highway Administration, Nebraska has the same rules. They're a pass-through agency for funds. But with other agencies, I think we need to be careful. It's easy to go in there and say, you know, we need to eliminate it, and you folks clapped because that's what we want to do. That's what I want to do. We need to cut government. That's what we do in Nebraska. We've done that. But we need to be careful of what we're cutting. We need to follow that same program that we did in Nebraska last year that's in the current Ryan plan that Representative Ryan just came out with, to look at these agencies under committee jurisdictions and make wise decisions on cutting programs that don't work.
Let me stay on this issue, and Don, I'll address this to you. The question of getting rid of and eliminating the Department of Education has been with us since Ronald Reagan. And there were some hopes with the Republicans in office that we could do that. We could come closer, but instead under George Bush it became even bigger under No Child Left Behind and what have you. So what are we to believe in the possibility of really eliminating any of these offices that you people talk about, and particularly, let's take it from the standpoint that you're just going to be freshman senators, so how effective can you be in even accomplishing anything along this line?
Well, I think you can almost look at it more broadly than just eliminating the Department of Energy. I think you can look at balancing the federal budget. I think you can look at developing our domestic energy resources. I think, and so I agree with and I've said the same thing myself on many occasions with what Pat Flynn said some time ago. I was very disappointed from 2000 to 2006 when the Republicans controlled the House, the Senate, and the presidency. And while they cut taxes, for which they should deserve full credit, and President Bush was very strong in defending our nation after 9/11. But other than that, many of the Republicans sent to Congress forgot their campaign promises and forgot why they were sent there by the American people. The American people wanted smaller government when they put the Republicans in control, and instead we got federal budget deficits. We got No Child Left Behind, imposing federal control on our local schools. They didn't take the actions needed to develop our domestic energy resources. They didn't roll back the federal regulatory burden anywhere near it should have been. And I think what we need to learn from that is not just any old Republican will do. You need someone who is philosophically and committed at their core to keeping those promises and doing what they said they would do when they were running for election. And we have too many Republicans in Washington who have forgotten that. And that's why I stress what my record is. And I have the endorsement of U.S. Senator Jim DeMint and U.S. Senator Mike Lee and of Freedom Works and of Club for Growth. And they've looked at the records of all the candidates, and they're convinced that Don Stenberg is the right candidate to go to Washington and keep his promises to cut the federal budget and reduce the power of the federal government on our lives.
Senator?
Well, I think it's important to look at people's records, too. My record in the legislature, we have limited the growth of government every year I've been in there. You know, we work hard. We keep our promises. I ran saying I was going to cut spending and find efficiencies in government. I've done that. We can do it at the federal level, too. It's not as easy when you're over $15 trillion in debt. When you have federal bureaucracy that is growing, the only growth we see in jobs. But we have to do it. I'm not a supporter of No Child Left Behind. I have never been a supporter of it, even during my time on a school board and president of the School Boards Association. Education works best at the local level. It's a state responsibility. The state has delegated that responsibility to our local school boards. So yes, there are a lot of programs you can look at eliminating, but I don't know if it's necessarily responsible for me to say to you, yes, I'm going to get rid of this department. Because as you said, Lee, that's hard to do. But if we don't start looking at those programs that are a waste of our money, because it's our money, it's not the government's money, programs that are a waste of our money or programs that can be better implemented at the state level or the local level, then we won't get anywhere. We have to start now.
Pat, same question. Why should we believe that you can eliminate anything in view of the fact that nothing has been eliminated, it keeps growing bigger, and since you're going to be a freshman senator, what could you possibly accomplish?
Well, number one, I believe the majority of America is more conservative than not. But we just keep going further and further to the left, whether Democrats or Republicans are in power. And the reason is because, once again, we aren't electing leaders anymore. We're electing career politician types. Now, I wouldn't say what I wanted to eliminate unless I really believed we could do it. And the thing is, regarding the Department of Education, for example, 7 years ago, that wouldn't have been palatable to the American people. But I haven't talked to a teacher today that is not in favor of eliminating the Department of Education. It's palatable to the American people. Teachers are no longer making their decisions. It's Washington making the decisions. The school boards don't even have much power anymore. So people are ready for this. And so really, if we start taking the message to the people, people will respond. They want this. And so, really, President Ronald Reagan was the same way. He had a media that hated him. I can relate to that. He had a Democrat and House and Senate that was Democrat, and he transcended all three of them by going to the people, and the people demanded that their representatives vote his way or they're gone. And so that's what we're up to. That's the type of leadership we're talking to in this country. So
we have another question. We have another question from the audience, but I would like to preface this with a news story today. I don't know if you people have heard it, but the president was on a hot mic, not knowing it, and was talking to the president of Russia and made the statement to him that he has another election to go through, but after the election, meaning after he's elected, he would be more flexible. He wanted that message to go to Putin. So the question is, how do you feel about the missile defense with Russia? And any comment that you might have on the president's remarks, and I'm tying it in there. I think the flexibility might have had something to do with the missile situation in Europe that Russia has been protesting us on. But nobody knows what he meant when he said that he's going to be more flexible. Don, would you start off on that question?
Sure. Thank you, Lee. Yeah, first of all, I strongly support a robust missile defense system, both to protect our country and to protect our allies in Western Europe and elsewhere. I did hear those comments by the President, and they are very disturbing. The President, of course, is our Commander-in-Chief. And although it's a dual responsibility with the Congress and only the Congress can declare war, clearly the Commander-in-Chief's position is an extremely important one in dealing with foreign nations. And I think this is just one very strong additional example of why we need to replace President Obama with someone strongly committed to the defense of our nation. It's very questionable whether he is. He has proposed dramatic, draconian cuts to our defense budget. The single most important job of the government of the United States, in my opinion, is the defense of our nation. Unless we're adequately defended, we don't have the freedom to make all the other decisions that we're talking about here tonight, whether it's the balanced budget or whether it's energy or whether it's federal regulation or any other issue. We have to have adequate defenses. And once again, the President, our current President, has shown he's not up to that task and cannot be counted on to carry it out. I will support any Republican nominated for President of the United States so that we will have a secure nation.
Deb?
I too believe that the number one responsibility of the federal government is our national security. The government needs to keep this country safe and to keep its citizens safe. And when you have a President of the United States who has to know that a microphone is on and makes comments like that, the wrong message is being sent not just to our allies but to our enemies. We don't need a man in the White House who's going to be flexible after an election. We need a man in the White House, or a woman. We need a man in the White House who's going to be strong, who's going to be firm, who's going to defend this country. And by sending out a message that he would be flexible, I believe he's put us in danger. We need to have a strong defense. We need to protect this country. And we need a man in the White House, or a woman, but we need a man in the White House who's going to do that job and take it seriously.
Pat?
Well, I never heard that comment, but obviously you think I believe it, because he's that type of guy. He's that type of man. He's a tyrant. He's a Marxist. That's what he is. That's who's backing him when it gets right down to it. And so, who do you want to send to Washington as your next United States Senator? In all sincerity, you may be here allied with another candidate, but I'm dead serious. This is a vote that really counts, folks. And so I'm saying to you, we need somebody that is a warrior citizen. And that's what this country was built upon. Of course, one of the main reasons for our Constitution and the Declaration of Independence was to provide a common defense. So yes, I'm very much for a missile defense. We're in dangerous times. Strength trumps all. The best foreign policy is strength. They respect strength. The enemy knows strength. They know who we're being led by, and we're letting it happen. As your next United States Senator, I would not let that happen. I would get to the people, and we have all means of communication to do that today. We do not have to rely on the media the way it is. We can go with the social media and get the organization right.
We have a question from the audience on Bob Kerrey. But before I ask the question the way it was worded here, I would like to ask each of you to comment on the Republican effort to keep Kerry off the ballot. Deb?
I'm very frustrated by Mr. Kerry coming to Nebraska and registering a number of times to vote. I think that's an issue, and I support the Republican Party in trying to bring that issue to the forefront.
Don?
Well, I think in the final analysis, whether Bob Kerrey will have his name printed on the ballot is going to be decided by the courts. I think the more important issue is that, frankly, Bob Kerrey is out of touch with Nebraska. He's not out of touch with Nebraska just because he's lived in New York the last 10 or 12 years, although that contributes to it. But Bob Kerrey is a liberal Democrat. He has voted against the balanced budget amendment. He's pro-choice. He has a liberal record on virtually every issue when he was in the U.S. Senate and when he ran for President of the United States. The polls show that I lead Bob Kerrey by 18%. When I ran against Ben Nelson, I started almost 30 points behind Ben Nelson, and we still turned that one into the closest U.S. Senate race in Nebraska history. We're going to defeat Bob Kerrey this fall because he's out of touch with Nebraskans. He's a liberal in a conservative state. He's someone who obviously is returning to our state, which he is from, for the sole purpose of running for the United States Senate. Nebraskans don't think that we need a third New York senator. They want 2 Nebraska senators, and that's why we'll defeat Bob Kerrey next fall. Thank you.
I've often said that I'm not concerned with Bob Kerrey's relationship with the Deborah-wingers. What bothers me is his relationship with the left-wingers. Pat, if you would...
Well, the Republican Party sent a letter to me explaining that law, and you have to be a citizen in Nebraska. You have to have a residence, your primary residence of Nebraska, to be a citizen. And so he shouldn't be running, period. And we should enforce that law. I mean, John Gale basically said it was, it wasn't right, but he was going to let him run anyway. And that's what I got out of it. And I was going like, oh, great, And so really, as citizens, I think we ought to start standing up against it and not let him run. I don't care about his ideology. He's breaking the law. That's the problem. A lot of our Congress, senators, presidents are breaking the law, and we're letting them. That's the issue here. We are a nation of laws. That's what made America great. And so now I'd like to get rid of a lot of these regulations, but the fact of it is we ought to make people adhere to the law. I was kind of trying to figure out where our Attorney General is on this. I think he's the top cop in the state. He should be defending that law. I mean, it's just like, get him, get him out of here. He shouldn't be running. So that's my attitude on it, to be real frank with you.
Let me explain that that John Gale was answering a question of where the Constitution stood on this issue, and the Constitution says you cannot be a senator unless you are a resident of the state in which you are elected on the day in which you are elected. So he was answering only what the Constitution says, and the Constitution, ladies and gentlemen, trumps state law. Still, despite what Obama is trying to do with it. The question that comes from the audience is, it says, Bob Kerrey is very charismatic. Call him Hollywood Bob or New York Bob, but he has a very polished image. How do you overcome the Hollywood image? How do you appeal to the voters attracted by that Hollywood image? Don, would you start that?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. I think the people of Nebraska are very skeptical of the Hollywood image. We saw this in the presidential election last time. We had a glib, attractive candidate on the Democratic side who talked about hope and change, ran a very charismatic type campaign, and 3 years later we have Obamacare, we have $1 trillion deficits year after year, we have tens of thousands of pages of crushing regulations. I don't think the people of this country, and particularly the people of Nebraska, are going to buy into another polished image. They want someone who is going to represent their values, who's going to change the direction of our country, who's going to work for a balanced budget amendment to the U.S. Constitution and reduce the size and scope of the federal government. We need a constitutionally limited federal government, which is what the Founding Fathers envisioned for us. So I'm not that concerned about Bob Kerry's image. I think this election will be decided on the issues, and we're on the right side of those issues.
Deb?
When I heard that Mr. Kerry was coming back to Nebraska to run for this seat, my comment to the paper was, this is Nebraska, not let's make a deal. Because that's what happened, folks, and we know it. Mr. Kerry said that himself, that he had conversations with Harry Reid. We don't need somebody going to Washington to vote with Harry Reid. We just had that with Ben Nelson. We don't need it again. Bob Kerry's been gone a long time from Nebraska. He's been gone over a decade. I don't think he was ever really in step with Nebraska, not with my values, and I believe he's become more liberal. It's not Hollywood Bob that's coming back. He hasn't been on the ballot for 18 years. People don't know Bob Kerry, and Bob Kerry has changed. Bob Kerry has a record now that is in stark contrast to my record. Bob Kerry raises taxes. I cut taxes and offer tax relief. Bob Kerry votes for partial birth abortion. I am 100% pro-life. Bob Kerry supports cap and trade. I oppose cap and trade. So when Bob Kerry comes back to Nebraska, I think he offers us a stark contrast that Nebraskans will see through. And so, welcome home, Bob.
Pat?
Well, when I first heard Bob Kerry was coming back to Nebraska, and he lied right out the gate to the individual from up north, I can't quite remember, Chuck Hasselbrook, I said, right out the gate, he's lying. And that's not permissible for Nebraskans, I do not believe. I haven't ran into too many Nebraskans that are real excited about Bob Kerry. I don't trust him. I would expect he would run a tenaciously underhanded campaign, and so I will be ready that as your Republican nominee for United States Senate. I know what he's up to. I'm not going to tell you what he's up to, but I know what he's up to, and he has a very good plan when it gets right down to it. And so, but we can trump that plan very easy. There's about 525,000 Republican registered voters in this state, and there's about 350,000 Democrats registered voters in this state, and there's about 180,000 independents. And I'm a uniter when it comes to that. I believe most of the Nebraskans are traditionalists, whether they're Republicans or Democrats, when it gets right down to it. And so they aren't really excited about that. But really, I'm not too worried about Bob Kerry. He's from New York, and that's where he belongs, and we'll send him back there.
Another question from the audience for Don Stenberg alone. Why did you oppose the Keystone XL pipeline with the Sierra Club?
No, I didn't oppose. I never opposed the Keystone XL pipeline. What I did say was that I felt that it shouldn't pass across the sandhills of the state of Nebraska, but I never was opposed to the construction of it. In fact, I strongly support construction of the XL pipeline, both to reduce our dependence on Mideast oil and to create jobs in the United States of America. So that's been my consistent position, so I don't know what the origin of that question was, because I have never been opposed to the construction of the XL pipeline.
Okay. Another question from the audience, and this gets it back into the bigger issues. Everyone complains about our current progressive tax code, but no one in the race today has fought for flat taxes very hard. How would you change our current joke of a tax code? Start with you, Pat.
Actually, if you went to my website, you would find out I'm for the fair tax. I've been for the fair tax since day one, and the fair tax it's a consumption tax. It gets rid of the IRS, which is completely unconstitutional as far as I'm concerned. It gets rid of corporate tax, the income tax, the estate tax, and the payroll tax. With the way farmland is today, the estate tax is a super tremendous issue. This would what this would do for America, it would just blow the socks off of business in America. And the only way we're going to get that is starting to take that to the people. But I've been for the fair tax from day one. I was initially for the flat tax once upon a time, but that still keeps the IRS around. And as far as I'm concerned, the IRS doesn't know their own laws. And so every business really is, we're breaking laws whether we know it or not. And that's getting a dangerous precedent in America, because really they can take it to us anytime they want. And as a business person, that's why I sold my business. As an investment advisor, I never saw a safe place for money anymore. And then I look at these Gatling gun regulations. I said, you know what? I won't have a business in 3 years if they get what they want. So what I'm really getting down to is this. I'm a desperate man when it comes to America. And I'm saying it's either their neck or ours, and it needs to be theirs.
Don?
I think the first thing that we need to address in looking at the tax situation is to recognize that unless the Congress acts, we're going to have a tax increase of extraordinary proportions. The Bush tax cuts expire at the end of this calendar year. And in the absence of congressional action, we'll be paying extraordinarily higher tax rates, which is going to be a further job killer in the United States, and it's going to be a huge drag on our economy and on our businesses. So the first thing we need to do as a stopgap measure is to make the Bush tax cuts permanent and avoid that huge tax increase that's scheduled for January 1, 2013. To improve the economic climate of our country, I support cutting the corporate tax rate to make the U.S. a more inviting place for corporations to locate their employees and do business. In order to spur economic growth, I would support making 100% depreciation deduction in the first year permanent, so that businesses are encouraged to buy new machinery and equipment and create jobs and improve their efficiency. Longer term, I would support a flat tax as a way to simplify the U.S. tax system, to make it more fair and to make it easier to understand. Thank you.
Senator?
Thank you, Lee. In 8 years, we have dealt with taxes at the state level. As I told you earlier, I helped pass the largest tax relief package in the history of the state of Nebraska. We've repealed the estate tax. We've capped occupation taxes. And this year, we're working on tax relief again, dealing with income tax that will help middle-class Nebraskans. So we've addressed those issues. We have a tax code, a federal tax code, that is pages and pages and pages and millions of words long. We need to simplify it. I've had a proposal on my website since December dealing with job creation and helping small businesses, and part of that is reforming the tax code. It's taking the corporate tax rate from 35%, which is the highest among our trading partners, down to 24%. It's eliminating the alternative minimum tax, which is starting to encroach upon middle-class Americans, which it was never intended to do. We need to eliminate that. We need to make the Bush tax cuts permanent. There are a number of things that we have to look at in order to help businesses grow, to make life easier for them, and to simplify the situation we have now with our tax code. Part of that is a discussion on the fair tax and also the flat tax. But those discussions aren't happening in the environment we now have in Washington.
Hang on to the mic, Senator. And do you believe that there should be term limits for the Senate and for the House? And if so, why?
I do believe in term limits at the federal level. And I would term limit myself if I was so honored to be elected to serve you there. At the state level, I'm serving under term limits right now. We have 2 terms. In Nebraska, that is difficult because we only have 1 House. But I can tell you from experience that it works. We see new people coming into the Nebraska legislature. They have fresh ideas. They work hard. We have a good turnover. I have 7 people running for my seat. So there's interest out there. Nobody's indispensable. Nobody is indispensable. I can be replaced, and I know I'm going to be replaced in the Nebraska legislature by a honest, good, hardworking citizen in my legislative district. The problem at the federal level is the amount of money that's involved, the power that comes from being in Congress or in the Senate. We see the career politicians, and we see what they've given us. Enough. We don't need that. Nobody's indispensable. We can replace people and go back to the idea that this should be public service.
Don, term limits.
I also support a term limits amendment to the Constitution of the United States that would limit senators to 2 terms and members of Congress to 3. As I mentioned earlier, as the Attorney General, I term limited myself. I think that we've seen across the country that the longer people are in Congress and the United States Senate, the more out of touch many of them become with their citizens. They get involved in vote trading for earmark projects, which, by the way, I'm also opposed to earmarks and will not vote for or ask for any earmarks. And just in case 2/3 of the members of the House and Senate don't vote in favor of federal term limits, I will term limit myself, if I'm elected to the United States Senate, to 2 terms in the Senate of the United States, which is the same 12 years that I limited myself to as your Attorney General. And I agree with Deb Fisher that there are more than 535 people who are capable of serving our country in the House and Senate of the United States. I think fresh ideas and fresh energy in those positions are a good thing. I think people that serve a shorter time are going to be less influenced by lobbyists than people who play golf with them for 20 or 30 years. So I'm a strong supporter of term limits, always have been, and will continue to be. Thank you.
Pat?
The only way I'm in support of term limits is by the people booting them out, actually. And I can attest to that. I helped Chuck Hagel leave, and I helped Senator Nelson leave. So I'm really saying I'm an ideologue when it gets right down to it. I believe the people have to get engaged. And unless we're going to be a very strong citizen, we're going to get what we got right now and maybe worse. So that's pretty idealistic, but that's what I believe. When I was a high school youth minister for 13 years, after 13 years, I said, really? That's enough. I did my duty. We built a great program. We're going to give someone else an opportunity to do this, and we're going to move on and look for better forms of leadership that we can really engage and be of best maximum service. And so, really, as United States Senator, I would do 2 terms, the max. That would be 12 years, and that's what I would do. But really, I'm going to say the unpopular thing because that's what I believe, and I think it's bad that we're term limiting some of these senators. The other side of the coin is this. We got term limits to get rid of Ernie Chambers, and really, the way we get rid of Ernie Chambers is we get people that can fight him within the legislature and fight him for real. And we can become better people by having a better competition.
Okay. I have one more question that should be easy to answer and shouldn't take too long, and I don't even know why they're asking it, except that the word lobbyist is perceived to be a bad thing. So the question is, have you ever been a registered lobbyist?
Have you ever
Pat?
No. I'm a Nebraskan, so that's what you pay me for, being a Nebraskan.
Don?
In 1983, one bill, one client, and that was more than I ever wanted to do, and I've never been involved in that again.
So you're just a little bit bad.
I'm sorry.
I say, so you're just a little bit bad.
Well, lobbyists have a bad rap, and I'm not in the business of defending them, but, every organization has folks back there representing their interests because the federal government's so powerful. The Nebraska Farm Bureau has a lobbyist in Washington. Some of our cities in the state of Nebraska has a lobbyist in Washington. And the reason they have to be there is we have such an intrusive regulatory federal government that they have to defend themselves and their constituents, whether it's farmers, whether it's the national cattlemen, or whether it's other organizations here in Nebraska. So our lobbyists would have a lot less influence and would be a lot less important if we reduce the powers of the federal government, reduce the amount that's spent, reduce the amount that they're regulated, so we didn't have to send people to Washington to represent the Farm Bureau and the cattlemen and all the other organizations that need protection in Washington. And that's what I'd like to do, shrink the federal government, and so there's a lot less need for lobbyists back in Washington.
Deb, besides answering whether you were ever a lobbyist, would you, as a senator, give us an idea of how effective you work with lobbyists, and particularly in the sense that they said under term limits the lobbyists were going to rule the unicameral?
I've never been a lobbyist. I've been a wife and a mother who raised 3 sons on a ranch. In the legislature, lobbyists have a purpose. You know, we have representatives from Farm Bureau, from Cattlemen, from Rural Electric Association, from the state chambers, local chambers of commerce. Do I think they run the place? I think Senator Brosh and I would both agree, no, they don't run the place. I listen to my constituents. That's who has the most influence on me, is when I'm traveling my district that's the size of New Jersey and putting on that 20,000, 25,000 miles a year, holding town hall meetings, meeting with constituents. That's who I listen to. I listen to Nebraskans who feel welcome to walk in any senator's office in our capital in Lincoln and know that senators will open their door and visit with them if you just happen to drop in and want to visit with us about an issue. That's who I listen to. I know that's who Senator Brosh listens to, and I believe that's who the majority of our state senators listen to, are the constituents, and the people of Nebraska have the power in this state.
Thank you. I have one more question, and for each of you, and then we'll go to the 2-minute closings. Or was it 2 minutes or a minute 90? 90 seconds, yeah, 90-second closing. How do you feel about super PACs, and should super PACs continue to be? Do you agree that they're a good thing? We'll start with you, Deb.
Anytime you're looking at millions and millions of dollars being spent on a political race, to me that's not a good thing. But super PACs are a fact of life that we now have in this country for a variety of reasons. As I said earlier, the vast majority of my contributions have come from people within the state of Nebraska, over 95%. I'm pleased to have endorsements from different associations here within the state, but I'm especially pleased that my donors are all across the state who have given me, I have one gentleman who gives me $5 a month. I think that's pretty cool. I have most of my donors are very small donors, but they're Nebraskans, and that's what's important. So that's what I think we need to focus on in this state, are Nebraskans and how they are supporting a campaign, their interest in the issues, and that's how we need to move forward. I'm not naive. I know this is going to be a very expensive race, especially with Bob Kerrey in the race. It's bringing in a lot of national attention. But I pledge to you that I will keep my attention focused on you and on the important issues that are facing our state and that are facing our country.
Don, you certainly have been the recipient, a strong recipient of beneficiary of a super PAC. How do you feel about them?
Well, I like the ones that are supporting me. I think we need to recognize why super PACs have grown up, and that is the the federal campaign finance laws that have been on the books going back to the 1970s and updated sometime since then. And frankly, the federal campaign finance rules are very unfair. They heavily favor incumbent United States senators and incumbent congressmen, and heavily favor the very rich. And so if you're very rich, you're allowed to spend unlimited amounts of your own money. If your cousin or your brother or your parents are very rich, they can contribute a maximum of $2,500 to your Senate campaign. And so the wealthy have a huge advantage. And then the other provision of the federal law that troubles me very much is the prohibition on coordinating your campaign with super PACs. The federal law prohibits it, and so we're following that law, and we're not doing it. But to me, the First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States guarantees freedom of association. And if you can't freely associate and talk to the people supporting you for the United States Senate, I think it's a violation of the First Amendment. Now, we're going to follow the law, but we need to change the campaign finance laws at the federal level to be fair to all candidates.
Pat?
Well, I don't really like super PACs. In fact, I think if there was one less super PAC in this state, I might be in the second place of this race. So, and I think it would be between me and the front runner, actually. And so the thing is this: I was very appalled at when the Republicans had the presidency, the Senate and the House from 2000 to 2006, they passed the McCain-Feingold bill. I'll never forget that moment. I know where I was when I was listening to it, and it was just like, they're keeping people like you and I out of this race because they're limiting the people, and now we got every type of PAC out there that's really, it's big money, and who knows where it's from, and it's not the people in Nebraska deciding this. Now, I've challenged you as Nebraskans to decide this for real, but I have some friends that could give me $50,000 to $100,000, and they would gladly do it, to be real frank with you. And I think that's the right of a U.S. citizen. We should be able to give what we want. We earned it. We should be able to give it away. And so that's really where I'm at. I can't stand the campaign finance reform laws right now, and I think it's very unfair. And but the fact of it is, that's what we got for the picture right now, and that's what I'll run against. And so we'll be fine whether they have a super PAC or not.
Pat, while you're warmed up, I'll let you give the 90-second wrap-up for you.
Abraham Lincoln said at Gettysburg, "We are testing whether this nation can long survive." Truthfully, America is at the test today. When historians look back at these times right here, will we be known as as a complacent, spoiled one-day wonder, or the land of the free, the home of the brave? The time is now for we, the people, to stand up and free ourselves of the self-imposed crisis. Last May, I sold my business and got in this race with both feet. I'm a desperado. Now, if you think the same way about America as I do, I'm challenging you to do the same thing. The last line of the Declaration of Independence states this: "And for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor." And that's what I'm asking you, to give some of your lives by working in our campaign. Ask Laird Dirks over here after the event, and we'll gladly sign you up to help. Give some of your fortune by contributing to our campaign. Every little bit helps. And give some of your sacred honor with your prayer. America will be victorious if more of us pray, work, contribute, vote, and get others to do the same. I'm Pat Flynn. I appreciate your vote and support, and God bless America.
Thank you. Don?
Thank you. Recent Omaha World Herald headline said this U.S. Senate race is about the character of the candidates, and I think that's very true. We need to think about what kind of person we want to represent us in the United States Senate. I believe that we need a senator who will offer bold solutions to our nation's problems. We need a true conservative, not a pretend conservative. We need a senator strongly committed to fundamental values, who does not flip-flop on important fundamental issues. We need a senator whose record matches his conservative rhetoric. We need a full-time senator who is committed to public service, not to personal financial gain while in office. In November, I will defeat Bob Kerrey and send him back to New York. And when I pack my bag to go to Washington in January of next year, I will not go back to fit right in. I will go back to change Washington. I will stand up to the big spenders of both political parties. And I'll work with solid conservatives like U.S. Senator Jim DeMint and U.S. Senator Mike Lee, who have endorsed me in this race, to change the direction of our nation. I will work for limited constitutional government so that for generations to come, our flag will continue to fly over the land of the free and the home of the brave. Thank you.
Jim.
As I've traveled the state and listened to people all across Nebraska, I've heard their frustrations and their concerns and their anger, and I share those concerns. We're in a state of crisis in this country, and it's not just a financial crisis, but it's a crisis of leadership. When I first ran for the legislature, I promised my constituents that you send me to Lincoln, I'm going to cut spending, I'm going to find efficiencies. And I got elected, and I rolled up my sleeves, and I got to work for them. And I've been pretty effective down in Lincoln in the legislature in taking on those tough issues and making those tough decisions and in passing major policy that helps better the lives of Nebraskans. We've done it without raising taxes. We balance our budget. That's what we do in Nebraska. We need to do that in Washington. Nebraskans are fed up. I'm not your usual politician. I'm not, obviously, one of the good old boys up here. We need to change the type of person that we send to Washington if we're going to change how Washington works. The same politicians that keep going back there have given us $15 trillion in debt. It's a mountain of debt. We have record deficits. We have job-killing Obamacare. We can change that. We need to send honest people to Washington with strong values, strong character. And I promise you that if you send me to Washington, I will roll up my sleeves and fight for you there. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the candidates, and thank you for coming. And let me say that I'm always pleased to be here in Blair. I ran for Congress in 1976, and Washington County voted overwhelmingly to send me to Washington, but unfortunately I didn't go. As a matter of fact, I've gotten out of politics altogether, really, as far as running. My son ran for the city council, and he came up to me after winning and said, everybody says I got elected on your name. He said, how come you never could? So I got out of politics after that. Thank you for being here tonight.
Let's hear it for all the candidates and Lee Terry Sr. for moderating. Thank you very much, Lee.